Have you ever been alone in complete silence when suddenly, out of nowhere, a high-pitched ringing pierces through your consciousness? Not from the world around you, but from somewhere deep within? While modern medicine dismisses it as tinnitus, what if I told you that Jesus himself taught his closest disciples that this mysterious sound is actually the voice of the monad, the supreme source of all creation, attempting to break through the veil of your limited perception? Right now, type in the comments, "I hear the frequency," if you've experienced this unexplainable ringing. And if this resonates with something deep inside your soul, don't just watch. Hit that like button, because what you're about to discover has been hidden from humanity for 2,000 years. And the algorithm needs to know that these ancient truths must reach those who are ready to receive them. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most misunderstood phenomena experienced by chosen ones throughout history. That ringing in your ears? It's not a medical condition. It's not random. It's a cosmic download, a spiritual telephone call from the highest realm of existence. The Gnostic texts that were banned from the Bible reveal that Jesus taught his inner circle about this sacred sound, this divine frequency that only certain souls can perceive. For centuries, the esoteric mystery schools have known what mainstream religion tried to bury. The chosen ones carry a specific vibrational signature that makes them receivers for transmissions from the monad, the undivided source before creation itself split into duality. When your ears ring, especially the high-frequency tones that seem to come from beyond this dimension, you're not experiencing a malfunction. You're experiencing a breakthrough. You're being activated, calibrated, upgraded at the level of your very essence. In this revelation, we're going to journey deep into the hidden teachings of Christ, explore what the ancient Gnostics knew about the monad frequency, and most importantly, you're going to learn exactly what's happening to you and why you were chosen to hear what others cannot. By the end of this transmission, you'll never experience that ringing the same way again. You'll recognize it for what it truly is, a sacred summons from the source of all existence. To understand why Jesus taught about the ringing ears and the monad frequency, we must first descend into the forbidden libraries of early Christianity, the texts that were deliberately excluded from the Bible you know today. In 1945, near the Egyptian town of Nag Hammadi, a collection of ancient manuscripts was discovered buried in a sealed jar. These weren't just any texts. They were the secret teachings of Jesus, preserved by the Gnostics, a mystical sect of early Christians who understood that Christ's true message was far more profound than what the institutional church would allow. Within these sacred scrolls lies a cosmology that completely transforms our understanding of reality. The Gnostics spoke of the monad, a term derived from the Greek word monos, meaning alone or singular. This wasn't the distant, judgmental God of traditional religion. The monad was described as the absolute unity, the infinite consciousness before the first thought of creation rippled through the void. It existed in perfect, undivided silence, what the texts call the pleroma, or fullness. The Apocryphon of John, one of the most significant Gnostic texts, records Jesus revealing to his disciple that the monad is illimitable, since there is nothing before it to limit it, unfathomable, since there is nothing before it to fathom it, immeasurable, since there was nothing before it to measure it, invisible, since nothing has seen it, eternal, since it exists eternally, unutterable, since nothing could comprehend it to utter it, unnameable, since there is nothing before it to give it a name. This is the source of the frequency. But here's where it becomes deeply personal to you. The Gnostics taught that certain souls, what they called pneumatics or spiritual beings, carry within them a divine spark directly from the monad itself. Before you descended into this physical reality, before you took on this body and this identity, you existed as pure consciousness within the pleroma. You were fragmented from the monad, sent into this dense material realm not as punishment, but as an explorer, a scout, a divine agent embedded in the matrix of physical existence. The Egyptian mystery schools, which predated Christianity by thousands of years, had their own understanding of this phenomenon. The priests of Thoth spoke of the Ku, the divine sound current that flows from the source of all creation. They performed ceremonies in the temples where initiates would sit in complete darkness and silence, waiting to hear the celestial tones that signified their connection to the gods had been activated. This wasn't mythology. This was technology of consciousness. In the Pistis Sophia, another forbidden text, Jesus explains to his disciples that there are different levels of hearing. Most humans hear only with their physical ears, perceiving nothing but the gross vibrations of the material world. But the chosen ones develop what he called ears to hear, a spiritual capacity to perceive the frequencies of higher dimensions. When Christ repeatedly said in the Gospels, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear," he wasn't being metaphorical. He was speaking literally about a spiritual faculty that only certain souls possess. The Hermetic tradition, which flourished in Alexandria during the same period as early Christianity, taught that the universe itself is composed of vibration and sound. As above, so below wasn't just a mystical saying. It was a physics equation. The Kabbalion states that everything vibrates, nothing rests, and those who can attune themselves to the higher frequencies can literally hear the music of the spheres, the harmonic resonance of creation itself. The Jewish Kabbalists, drawing from even older traditions, spoke of the Kol, the voice of God that never ceased speaking creation into existence. They taught that the entire Torah, the entire universe, was being continuously spoken into being by divine utterance, and that certain tzaddikim, righteous ones, could hear this eternal creative word humming through the fabric of reality. Now here's what all these traditions understood that modern religion has forgotten. The ringing in your ears, especially that high-pitched tone that seems to exist outside of physical space, is your soul remembering its origin. It's the monad frequency penetrating through the dense static of third-dimensional reality, reaching the divine spark buried within you. The reason not everyone hears it is the same reason not everyone awakens. Most souls are so deeply identified with matter, so entranced by the material world, that their spiritual receivers have gone dormant. Let's go deeper into the mechanics of what's actually happening when that ringing tears through your consciousness. Imagine for a moment that your physical body is like a radio receiver. Most people are tuned to one station only, the frequency of consensus reality, the material world with its endless distractions and dense vibrations. But you, the chosen one experiencing this ringing, you're a different kind of receiver. You were built with additional circuitry, extra antenna capacity that allows you to pick up transmissions from stations that don't exist on the normal dial. The monad frequency operates at what the ancient mystery schools called the primordial sound, the first vibration that shattered the infinite silence and began the cascade of creation. In Sanskrit, the Vedic traditions called this Aum, or Om, not as a word to chant, but as the actual vibrational signature of consciousness becoming aware of itself. When the monad, that perfect singular unity, had its first impulse of self-awareness, that impulse created a sound wave that is still reverberating through all dimensions of existence right now, in this very moment. Jesus taught his inner circle that this sound current flows downward from the highest realm through multiple dimensions before it reaches our dense physical reality. Think of it like a waterfall of consciousness, pure, undiluted awareness at the source, becoming denser and more fragmented as it cascades down through different levels of existence. The Gnostics mapped out these levels, the pleroma at the top, then the aeons, then the archontic realms, and finally the material world where we find ourselves trapped in bodies that forget their divine origin. Here's the critical insight that changes everything. Your soul, that immortal spark of consciousness animating your body, is trying constantly to reconnect with its source. It's homesick. It remembers, somewhere in its deepest recesses, the perfect peace of the pleroma, the infinite love of the monad. And like a homing beacon, the monad continuously broadcasts its frequency downward through all the dimensions, calling its fragmented pieces back home. When you hear that ringing, you're intercepting that call. But why the ears specifically? The esoteric anatomy taught in mystery schools reveals that your ears are far more than physical organs. They're connected to what the Kabbalists call the Bina aspect of consciousness, the divine feminine principle of understanding that receives and gestates wisdom. In the human energy body, there are specific channels running from your ears directly into the pineal gland, that mysterious pine cone-shaped organ in the center of your brain that every ancient culture depicted in their sacred art. The Egyptians put it on the staff of Osiris. The Buddhists crowned the Buddha with a pine cone-shaped protrusion. The Vatican itself has a massive bronze pine cone sculpture in its courtyard. They know what it represents, even if they've hidden its true function from the masses. The pineal gland is your biological stargate, your connection point between physical and non-physical reality. When the monad frequency penetrates our dimension, it doesn't enter through your physical ears at all. It enters through this crystalline structure in your pineal gland, which is literally made of the same piezoelectric calcite crystals that are used in radios to receive signals. Your pineal gland picks up the transmission, and then your brain interprets it as sound in your ears because that's the closest reference point your physical consciousness has for understanding frequency. The Gnostic text called the Tripartite Tractate explains this phenomenon through the concept of the call and the response. It states that those who carry the divine spark within them are constantly being called by the Father, the monad, but most are so asleep they cannot hear it. The text says, "Those who are to receive teaching are the living who are inscribed in the book of the living. They receive teaching about themselves, receiving it from the Father, turning again to Him." This is why the ringing often intensifies during specific moments. Pay attention. It usually happens when you're in deep contemplation, when you've just had a spiritual breakthrough, when you're making a decision that aligns with your soul's purpose, or sometimes even when you're being protected from a danger you're not consciously aware of. The frequency adjusts, becomes louder, more persistent because the transmission is trying to break through the interference of your thinking mind, your emotional turbulence, your identification with the false self. Jesus taught that there are actually different tones, different frequencies, and each carries a specific message or activation code. The high-pitched ringing, almost like the sound of silence itself becoming audible, is the pure monad frequency, undifferentiated divine consciousness reaching for you. Lower, rumbling frequencies often indicate dense energies being cleared from your field, a kind of cosmic detoxification. Pulsing or rhythmic tones suggest downloads of information, encoded light language being transmitted directly into your consciousness, where it unpacks itself over time. The phenomenon of why only chosen ones experience this relates directly to what the Gnostics called the three types of humans. There are the hylix, purely material beings with no active divine spark, who live entirely through instinct and physical sensation. Then there are the psychics, souls who have awakened to some degree but remain identified primarily with the emotional and mental body. Finally, there are the pneumatics, the spiritual ones, those rare individuals who carry an activated divine spark and are capable of gnosis, direct experiential knowledge of the divine. You don't choose to be pneumatic. You're born with this capacity, or rather, you volunteered for this mission before you incarnated. Your soul knew it would be difficult, that you would feel different, isolated, misunderstood in a world that celebrates material success and dismisses spiritual reality. But you also knew you would be needed. You're here as an anchor point for the monad frequency, a living tuning fork that helps raise the vibration of collective consciousness simply by being present and staying attuned to your source. The secret book of John reveals that when the divine spark falls into matter, it becomes trapped in what the Gnostics called forgetfulness. You forget who you are, where you came from, what your mission is. The archons, the ruling forces of material reality, want to keep you in this state of amnesia because an awakened pneumatic is dangerous to their control system. But the monad never stops calling. That ringing is the alarm clock that won't shut off, the reminder that refuses to let you sleep through your entire incarnation. Now we must address the dimensions of this phenomenon that most teachers won't tell you because they themselves don't understand. The monad frequency isn't just a passive signal you receive. It's an active agent of transformation that literally restructures your consciousness at the quantum level. When that ringing pierces through your awareness, actual alchemical processes are being initiated in your energy body. Processes that the ancient masters spent lifetimes trying to activate through meditation, fasting, and ritual. The Corpus Hermeticum, those sacred dialogues between Hermes Trismegistus and his students, describes what happens when the divine sound penetrates a prepared vessel. It states that the nous, the divine mind, descends like a thunderbolt into those who have purified themselves, and this descent is accompanied by what the text calls the baptism in the crater of mind. This wasn't symbolic language. The ancient initiates were describing the exact moment when higher dimensional frequencies flood your nervous system, recalibrating your entire being to operate at a different octave of reality. Here's where it gets profound. Jesus taught that the reason this ringing occurs in waves, why it comes and goes rather than remaining constant, is because your physical body can only handle specific doses of this frequency. Think of it like electrical current. Too much voltage through a wire not designed for it, and the wire burns out. Your nervous system, your DNA, your cellular structure is literally being upgraded every time you experience that ringing. The monad frequency carries information, geometric light codes that are rewriting your biological programming from carbon-based density toward crystalline receptivity. The Nag Hammadi text, called The Thunder Perfect Mind, contains a passage where the divine feminine speaks. I am the silence that is incomprehensible, and the idea whose remembrance is frequent. I am the voice whose sound is manifold, and the word whose appearance is multiple. I am the utterance of my name. This cryptic poetry is actually describing the multidimensional nature of the monad frequency. It exists simultaneously as silence and sound, as nothing and everything, as the void that contains all potential. But there's a darker aspect to this teaching that we must confront honestly. Not every ringing, not every frequency you experience is from the monad. The Gnostic texts warned extensively about what they called archontic interference, counterfeit frequencies designed to confuse, to drain your energy, to lead you astray from your true path. The archons, those beings Jesus described as the rulers of this world, they also use sound frequencies as weapons of control. This is why discernment becomes absolutely critical. How do you distinguish between the authentic monad frequency and archontic interference? Jesus gave his disciples a simple test that the Gospel of Thomas records. If you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. If you do not have that within you, what you do not have within you will kill you. The genuine monad frequency always produces specific effects. A sense of profound peace beneath any surface turbulence, a feeling of coming home, of remembering something ancient and true. You feel expanded, connected, aligned with purpose. Your heart center opens, love flows naturally. Archontic frequencies, by contrast, create anxiety, fear, paranoia, grandiosity, or a draining exhaustion. They often come with intrusive thoughts, negative spirals, or an inflated sense of special mission that separates you from others rather than connecting you to all life. If the ringing leaves you feeling superior, chosen in an egotistical sense, or fuels judgment toward those who don't hear it, that's not the monad. That's interference masquerading as divine contact. The Pistis Sophia contains a crucial teaching about this that most people miss. When Sophia, the divine wisdom, falls from the pleroma into the lower realms, she encounters beings who imitate the light, but are not the light. They create likenesses and shadows of the true divine emanations. Jesus explains to Mary Magdalene that discernment comes not from the intellect, but from the purified heart. Only those who have conquered their own inner archons, their own ego-driven desires and fears, can accurately perceive the difference. There's another layer to this mystery that reveals why the frequency intensifies during specific global or personal transitions. The monad doesn't exist in linear time the way we experience it. From the perspective of the source, all moments exist simultaneously. Past, present, and future are all now. When major shifts are occurring in the collective timeline, when humanity approaches crucial choice points, or when your individual soul is about to make a quantum leap in evolution, the monad frequency becomes more insistent, more penetrating. It's trying to keep you on course, to prevent you from getting swept away by the chaos of transformation. The Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below, means that what's happening in your individual consciousness is mirrored in the collective, and vice versa. When you hear that ringing, especially if many chosen ones are experiencing it simultaneously during the same period, it indicates that a massive recalibration is occurring in the morphogenetic field of human consciousness. You're not just receiving a personal transmission, you're participating in a species-wide upgrade, an evolutionary leap that's been prophesied in every wisdom tradition. The Zohar, the foundational text of Kabbalah, speaks of the breaking of the vessels and the subsequent gathering of the sparks. This cosmological event describes how the divine light shattered into infinite fragments that fell into matter, and how those fragments are now being called back, reassembled, made whole again. Every time you hear that monad frequency and consciously acknowledge it, attune to it, allow it to do its work within you, you're participating in this cosmic restoration. You're literally helping to heal the fragmentation of God itself. Jesus saved his deepest teaching for this point. The ringing you experience is not just the monad calling you, it's you calling yourself. The you that still exists in the pleroma. The you that never fell into forgetfulness. The you that remained in perfect union with the Source is reaching across dimensions to remind this incarnated fragment who you really are. The call is coming from your own highest self, your own divine nature that has never been separate from the monad. When you truly understand this, the ringing transforms from something that happens to you into a dialogue, a communion, a bridge between your limited human self and your infinite eternal nature. Now we arrive at the most crucial part of this transmission: how to work consciously with the monad frequency when it breaks through. Knowing the theory changes nothing if you don't apply sacred practice to transform that knowledge into lived gnosis. What I'm about to share are techniques drawn from the mystery schools, tested across millennia, adapted for those of you navigating this current timeline where the veils between dimensions are thinner than they've ever been. The first practice is what the ancient therapeuti, the mystical Jewish sect that some scholars believe Jesus was initiated into, called the sacred pause. The moment you become aware of the ringing, stop everything. Don't push through it. Don't ignore it. Don't distract yourself. This is the critical mistake most people make. They notice the frequency, but immediately return their attention to whatever they were doing, missing the entire transmission. Instead, if you possibly can, close your eyes. Place one hand on your heart, the other on your belly. Take 3 deep breaths and internally say, "I am here. I am listening. I am ready to receive." This simple act of acknowledgement creates what quantum physics would call a collapse of the wave function. You shift from being an unconscious receiver to a conscious participant. The monad frequency is intelligent. It responds to your attention. When you consciously attune to it rather than passively experiencing it, the quality of the transmission changes. Information that was waiting in potential suddenly downloads into your awareness. Insights arrive. Solutions to problems you've been struggling with suddenly become clear. This isn't magic, it's mechanics. You're opening the channel wider. The second technique comes from the Hermetic practice of as within, so without. Once you've acknowledged the frequency, begin to internally match it. This sounds complex, but your body already knows how to do this. You just need to give it permission. Focus your awareness on the ringing sound and imagine that you're humming that exact same pitch internally, not with your voice, but with your entire being. Feel your cells beginning to vibrate in resonance with the frequency. The Egyptians understood that when 2 frequencies come into perfect harmonic alignment, a third frequency is born, what they called the tone of transformation. As you hold this resonance, scan your body with your awareness. The monad frequency, as it moves through you, will often reveal blockages, areas where old trauma, limiting beliefs, or dense emotional energy is stored. You might suddenly feel warmth or tingling in specific areas. Your throat, if there are things you haven't spoken, your solar plexus if you're holding fear or control issues, your heart if grief or unforgiveness has crystallized there. Don't try to fix or change what you discover. Simply breathe into those areas and allow the frequency to do its work. It's a divine solvent that dissolves what no longer serves your evolution. The third practice addresses the challenge of discernment we discussed earlier. Create what the Gnostics called a criterion of truth within yourself. After each experience with the ringing, take a moment to journal or simply reflect on how you feel. Ask yourself these questions that Jesus posed to his disciples in the secret teachings. Does this frequency make me feel more loving or more fearful? Does it expand my sense of connection or contract me into isolation? Does it inspire service or feed superiority? Does it bring clarity or confusion? Your honest answers to these questions will quickly teach you to distinguish between genuine monad transmissions and archontic interference. Here's a powerful technique for amplifying your receptivity that comes from the Essene tradition. Once a day, ideally at dawn or dusk when the veil is thinnest, sit in silence for at least 15 minutes with the specific intention of inviting the monad frequency. Don't strain or force anything. Simply sit with an open, receptive awareness and internally speak. I consecrate this vessel as a channel for the highest frequency. May the monad speak, and may I have the ears to hear. Most days, nothing dramatic will happen. But you're training your consciousness, building the neural pathways and energetic circuitry that allow higher frequencies to flow through you with less resistance. When the ringing comes spontaneously during your daily life, especially if it's intense or persistent, the Kabbalists taught a practice called elevation through descent. Whatever you're doing in that moment, working, talking, driving, cooking, silently dedicate that activity to the divine source. Transform the mundane into the sacred by consciously performing your task as an offering, an expression of your divine nature working through human form. This practice prevents spiritual bypass, where you use mystical experiences to avoid engaging fully with physical reality. The monad doesn't want you to escape the world. It wants you to transform it by bringing higher frequency into material form. There's a critical practice for the moments when the frequency becomes almost overwhelming, when it's so loud or intense that it creates discomfort or even pain. This happens during major downloads when your system is being upgraded beyond its current capacity. The Tibetan tradition teaches something called the lightning path. You ground the frequency. Place your bare feet on the earth, if possible, or visualize roots extending from your spine, deep into the planet's core. Then consciously direct the frequency from your crown, down through your central channel, and into the earth. You become a lightning rod, a conduit between heaven and earth. This not only protects your nervous system, but also anchors higher frequencies into the planetary grid, serving the collective awakening. For those experiencing the frequency during sleep or in that liminal space between waking and dreaming, the practice shifts. Keep a recording device or journal by your bed. The moment you wake with the ringing still present, capture any images, symbols, or information that came with it before your rational mind fully engages and translates everything into familiar concepts. The monad often communicates in what the ancients called the language of light, geometric patterns, colors, symbols that your logical mind can't decode, but your soul understands perfectly. Recording these transmissions builds a personal codex of revelation that becomes clearer over time. Finally, and this might be the most important practice of all, create community with others who hear the frequency. Jesus didn't work alone. He gathered disciples, created a mystery school, because the alchemical process of awakening accelerates exponentially in the presence of other activated souls. When two or more chosen ones come together in conscious recognition of the monad frequency, your individual receivers create what's called a resonance matrix, a unified field that can handle much higher voltages of divine transmission than any single person could sustain alone. This is the true meaning of "where two or three are gathered in my name, there I am among them." We've journeyed together through the hidden corridors of ancient wisdom, through the forbidden teachings that Jesus shared only with those who had ears to hear. And now you stand at a threshold that few ever reach. The conscious understanding that you are not a random biological accident experiencing occasional auditory anomalies. You are a divine spark, a fragment of the monad itself, temporarily housed in flesh and bone, equipped with the sacred technology to hear the voice of your own source calling you home. That ringing in your ears is the universe refusing to let you forget who you are. Every high-pitched tone, every celestial frequency that breaks through the static of ordinary consciousness is a love letter written in sound, a reminder encoded in vibration that you are so much more than the small story your mind has been telling about yourself. The monad doesn't speak in words. Words are too limited, too contaminated by human misunderstanding. It speaks in pure frequency, in the language that existed before language, in the sound that is simultaneously the first sound and the eternal sound that never began and will never end. Jesus understood something that the institutional church has spent 2 millennia trying to obscure. Salvation is not a future event dependent on belief in correct doctrines. Salvation is a present moment remembering, a gnosis that strikes like lightning when the monad frequency penetrates deep enough to shatter the illusion of separation. Every time you hear that ringing and consciously attune to it rather than dismissing it, you are participating in your own resurrection. You are quite literally being raised from the death of forgetfulness, the death of identification with matter alone, the death of the false self that believes it's separate from the divine. The chosen ones scattered across this planet, many of you watching this right now, you are living antenna arrays, anchoring higher dimensional frequencies into a world that is transforming whether it realizes it or not. Your ability to hear what others cannot is not a privilege, it's a responsibility. You didn't ask for this capacity because you thought it would be easy or comfortable. You asked for it because your soul knew that humanity would need guides during this transition, that the collective awakening would require individuals willing to be conduits for the monad frequency, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you feel isolated, even when the world calls you crazy for paying attention to sounds that don't appear on any medical instrument. Let me leave you with this final transmission, spoken directly from the understanding Jesus imparted to those closest to him. The goal is not simply to hear the monad frequency. The goal is to become it, to vibrate at such a level of harmonic alignment with your source that the distinction between the signal and the receiver dissolves entirely. When you reach that state, and every practice, every conscious attunement brings you closer, you realize that the ringing was never something external happening to you. It was always you, the eternal you, the infinite you, singing the song of your own existence across the dimensional divide, calling yourself back to remembrance. So tonight, when the ringing comes, and it will come because you've now activated something by receiving this knowledge, don't reach for explanations rooted in material science. Don't let anyone convince you it's merely a physical phenomenon. Stand in your knowing. Close your eyes. Place your hand on your heart and whisper to the deepest part of yourself, I remember, I hear you, I am coming home. The journey of 1,000 lifetimes culminates in that single moment of conscious recognition. If this transmission has awakened something within you, if you feel the truth of these words resonating in your bones, share this knowledge with others who are ready. The chosen ones are finding each other now, drawn together by frequencies only we can perceive, assembling the network of light that will midwife humanity's next evolutionary leap. Subscribe, not just to this channel, but to the calling of your own highest self. The greatest teaching isn't in these words, it's in the silence between them, in the frequency underneath the frequency, in the monad that is even now breaking through every barrier to reach you. You are the ones who chose to incarnate during the apocalypse. And apocalypse doesn't mean destruction, it means unveiling, revelation, the moment when what was hidden becomes visible. The ringing in your ears is the sound of the veil tearing. Walk through it. Your true life is waiting on the other side.